The unexpected encounter. The Nebulon warship Celestial Vanguard drifted through the void, its once magnificent silhouette now marred by extensive damage. Plasma burns scared its hull, and emergency containment fields flickered weakly across gaping breaches. What had been the pride of the Nebulon defense fleet was now barely more than a crippled vessel limping through unfamiliar space. On the command deck, Captain Cyrilla Ellerin stood with her three primary arms crossed tightly against her thorax, while her fourth manipulator traced nervous patterns across the tactical display. Her iridescent exoskeleton had dulled with exhaustion, and her compound eyes reflected the emergency lighting that bathed the bridge in an ominous crimson glow. Life support at 23% capacity, Captain, reported her first officer, Commander Vex. Core containment systems failing. We have approximately 14 hours before complete system collapse. Ellerin's mandibles clicked in frustration. The ambush at the Veil Nebula had caught them entirely off guard. The Kryx Raiders had appeared from nowhere, their new cloaking technology rendering them invisible until they opened fire. The Celestial Vanguard had fought valiantly, destroying 3 enemy vessels before initiating an emergency jump that saved them from certain destruction, but at a terrible cost. Now 273 crew members were dead, another 189 in emergency cryostasis to conserve oxygen, and the ship itself was more coffin than vessel. What systems remain within jump range? She demanded, her voice unnaturally steady despite the dire circumstances. The navigation officer hesitated, antenna drooping. Only one viable system, Captain. Sol. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Sol. Earth. Home to humanity. A species known throughout the galaxy as unpredictable, dangerous, and fiercely territorial. The Nebulon Confederation had limited diplomatic contact with humans, viewing them primarily as volatile newcomers to interstellar politics. Their intelligence reports painted humans as emotional, erratic, and surprisingly aggressive for their size. The Diplomatic Corps has explicitly classified Sol as a restricted zone. Commander Vex reminded her, humans have rejected all official contact with the Confederation for the past 60 cycles. Their leadership remains unpredictable following the Proxima incident. I'm well aware of protocol, Commander. Ellerin snapped, antenna quivering. She considered their options, which in truth were non-existent. But we won't survive another jump. We won't survive another day without assistance. She straightened her posture, decision made. Set course for Earth. Prepare a distress signal on all standard frequencies. Her officers exchanged worried glances but complied without question. They trusted her, even if her decision might lead them to their final moments. The Celestial Vanguard adjusted its trajectory, burning the last of its maneuvering fuel to orient toward the Sol system. Message prepared, Captain, announced the communications officer. Ellerin nodded. Send it, and may the ancestors guide our path. The message was simple. Nebulon vessel Celestial Vanguard critically damaged. Life support failing. Request emergency assistance. We come in peace. For 4 hours, nothing. The damaged warship continued its slow approach toward the inner system, past the orbit of Neptune. Ellerin had begun preparing end-of-life protocols when the communications array suddenly chirped to life. Incoming transmission, reported the communications officer, mandibles wide with surprise. It's Earth. They're responding. The main view screen flickered, and a human face appeared, pale-skinned with auburn hair tied back tightly and eyes that evaluated the Nebulons with immediate concern rather than hostility. Nebulon vessel, this is Commander Alexandra Novak of Earth's Orbital Emergency Response Network. We've received your distress call and have dispatched assistance vessels to your location. Please maintain your current trajectory. Help will reach you in approximately 35 minutes. Ellerin blinked in confusion. You're sending help. Just like that. The human's expression softened slightly. You're in trouble. Of course we're sending help. Before Ellerin could respond, the human continued. We're transmitting emergency protocols and approach procedures now. Our ships are equipped with universal adapters, but if you have any specific requirements for atmospheric composition or gravity needs, please advise immediately. Commander Vex moved to Ilorin's side. "Captain, this could be a trap," he whispered. "The humans might seek to capture a Confederation warship for their own technological advancement." Ilorin considered this, but shook her head. "We have no choice. If they wanted to destroy us, they could simply wait for our systems to fail." She turned back to the screen. "We accept your assistance, Commander Novak. The Celestial Vanguard carries 712 souls. Our atmosphere is methane nitrogen, based with trace hydrogen sulfide. We require 1.3 times Earth standard gravity, and our wounded include radiation exposure cases." Commander Novak was already nodding, typing notes into an unseen console. "Understood. Medical and engineering teams are being briefed now. Just hold on a little longer, Captain. We're coming." True to their word, 33 minutes later, the bridge crew watched in astonishment as 7 vessels appeared from the darkness of space. They were not military ships, but clearly purpose-built rescue craft, their hulls adorned with universal symbols for medical aid and emergency services. The ships surrounded the Celestial Vanguard with practiced efficiency. Docking tubes extended, making contact with their hull at precisely the right locations to avoid damaged sections. Within minutes, humans in sealed environmental suits were boarding, carrying equipment, medical supplies, and portable atmosphere generators. A team of humans arrived on the bridge, led by a tall, broad-shouldered individual with streaks of gray in their dark hair and movements that conveyed absolute confidence. They removed their helmet, revealing a face lined with experience yet bright with determination. "Captain Ilorin, I'm Dr. Marcus Washington, Emergency Response Coordinator. We've got engineering teams working on your life support and hull integrity. Medical teams are setting up in your infirmary." The human extended a hand in what Ilorin recognized as their species greeting gesture. After a moment's hesitation, Ilorin reached out with her lower right arm and awkwardly mimicked the handshake. "You came prepared for our physiology," she observed, noting the specialized equipment the humans had brought. Dr. Washington nodded. "We've had limited official contact with your species, but our xenobiology database is quite comprehensive. We've synthesized compatible medical compounds and brought specialized radiation treatment protocols." Ilorin's crew watched in stunned silence as the humans moved through their ship with purpose and expertise. There were no weapons drawn, no demands made, just humans working tirelessly to save a ship full of aliens who, until today, had been considered potential adversaries. Within hours, the emergency containment fields were replaced with proper barriers. Life support stabilized. The wounded were receiving treatment that the Celestial Vanguard's own medical staff acknowledged was superior to their own techniques. In engineering, Ilorin found herself watching a team of human technicians disassemble and rebuild the ship's damaged power distribution system with astonishing speed. Their tools were simple compared to Nebulon technology, yet they worked with an intuitive understanding that left her chief engineer speechless. "How are they doing this?" her engineer whispered. "They're using mechanical tools where we would require molecular assemblers. It should be impossible." A human technician overheard and laughed. "Never underestimate what can be accomplished with a wrench, some duct tape, and proper motivation," she said, sliding out from under a console. Her face was streaked with grease, but her eyes sparkled with the challenge. "I'm Lieutenant Riley Chen, by the way. Your power grid is fascinating. It's like someone combined quantum flux principles with good old-fashioned copper wiring. Our systems are based on technologies refined over centuries," Ilorin said, unable to keep the pride from her voice despite their circumstances. The human nodded appreciatively. "Elegant designs, but sometimes elegant breaks hard. These jury-rigged bypasses won't be pretty, but they'll get you home." Jury-rigged. Ilorin's translator struggled with the term. "Improvised," Lieutenant Chen explained. "Making do with what you have. It's kind of a human specialty." As the hours passed, Ellerin began to notice something strange about the human approach. Where Nebulon engineers would follow precise protocols and procedures, the humans seemed to improvise constantly. They worked in teams that formed and reformed fluidly, communicating in shorthand that somehow conveyed complex concepts with minimal words. When confronted with unexpected problems, they would pause, discuss multiple unorthodox approaches, then implement solutions that often violated standard engineering principles yet somehow worked. More curious still, they integrated seamlessly with her crew. Despite the vast biological differences and the cumbersome environmental suits they wore to survive in the methane-rich atmosphere, the humans displayed an uncanny ability to adapt to Nebulon communication styles and work processes. In the medical bay, Dr. Washington was coordinating with the Nebulon Chief Medical Officer over treatment protocols. "Your biology is fascinating," the human was saying. "Your cellular regeneration rate is remarkable once the initial trauma is addressed. Yet your treatments are proving more effective than our own," the medical officer replied, her confusion evident. Dr. Washington shrugged. "We've had to become very good at emergency medicine. Our history has given us plenty of practice." When Ellerin asked Commander Novak why Earth had responded so readily to their distress call, the human seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. "It's what we do," she explained as they walked through a newly repaired corridor. "There's an old maritime tradition on Earth. You never ignore a distress call, no matter who it comes from. Space may be vast, but the principle remains the same. Out here, we're all just travelers trying to survive the void." "Even potential enemies?" Ellerin asked. Commander Novak smiled. "Captain, in our experience, someone you've helped through their darkest hour rarely remains an enemy. And even if they do," she shrugged, "we still wouldn't leave them to die. That's not who we are." As the first day of repairs turned into the second, Ellerin found herself revising every preconception she had held about humans. The diplomatic briefings had described them as unpredictable and potentially dangerous, but had failed to mention their extraordinary adaptability, their disregard for seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and their inexplicable willingness to aid those in need without apparent strategic advantage. Late in the ship's night cycle, Ellerin found Lieutenant Chen still working, her environmental suit now customized with what appeared to be hand-drawn symbols and extra pockets filled with tools. "You should rest," Ellerin said. "Your team has been working for nearly 20 Earth hours." Chen smiled tiredly. "We're rotating shifts. I'm just finishing up this power junction. Besides, your ship is fascinating. I've never seen phase induction technology implemented quite like this before." Ellerin's antenna twitched in surprise. "You understand our phase induction systems. That's highly advanced technology." The human's smile widened. "The principles are similar to some experimental work we've been doing. Different implementation, but the underlying physics is universal." She patted the repaired junction. "Your engineers designed a beautiful system. Very efficient, but maybe a bit too elegant." Too elegant. Ellerin hadn't heard such criticism before. Systems that are too perfect sometimes lack redundancy, flexibility, the ability to fail in useful ways. Chen gestured around them. "We're incorporating some backup pathways as we repair. Not as efficient, maybe, but they'll give you options if something goes wrong again." As Chen returned to her work, Ellerin realized what had been nagging at her since the humans arrived. The humans weren't just fixing their ship, they were improving it. Not with superior technology, but with a fundamentally different approach to engineering itself. And Ellerin began to wonder what other surprises humanity might have in store, beyond mere repairs. By the third day, the Celestial Vanguard was transformed. Emergency systems had been replaced with fully functional alternatives, many incorporating hybrid designs that merged Nebulon technology with human engineering principles. The ship's power grid now operated at 93% efficiency, not quite its original capacity, but remarkably close given the extensive damage it had suffered. More surprising than the technical achievements was the atmosphere that had developed aboard the vessel. What had begun as a desperate emergency response had evolved into something that resembled a cultural exchange. Off-duty human technicians gathered in the ship's communal spaces, their environmental suits modified for comfort during extended wear, engaging in animated conversations with curious Nebulon crew members. Captain Ellerin found Commander Novak in the observation deck, gazing out at the Earth ships that maintained formation around the celestial vanguard. "Your people have accomplished more in 3 days than I would have thought possible in 3 weeks," Ellerin said, settling beside the human. Novak smiled. Necessity and curiosity, a powerful combination. Curiosity. Ellerin's antenna tilted questioningly. "Your ship represents technology we've only theorized about. The opportunity to see it in action, to understand how different minds approach similar problems. That's irresistible to engineers like Lieutenant Chen." Novak turned from the viewport. "But it's more than that. This is the first substantive contact between our species in over 60 years. For many of my crew, you're the first non-humans they've ever met." Ellerin's compound eyes studied the human carefully. "Yet your government has maintained a policy of isolation from the Confederation." "Politics," Novak said with a dismissive gesture. "After the Proxima incident, there were concerns. But people aren't always defined by their government's policies." Ellerin had been briefed on the Proxima incident, a failed first contact scenario where miscommunication had led to a human colony being quarantined by Confederation forces. No casualties had resulted, but humans had interpreted the action as hostile and had limited official interactions ever since. "If I may ask a personal question," Ellerin ventured, "why did you join your emergency response network?" Novak considered the question. "My parents were first responders, what we call people who rush toward disasters to help. When I was young, our home was hit by a hurricane, a violent storm. We lost everything. For weeks, we lived in a shelter, relying on the kindness of strangers who came from thousands of kilometers away just to help people they'd never met." She smiled at the memory. "I wanted to be like them." Ellerin tried to process this. In Nebulon society, assistance was methodically organized by governmental units based on clearly defined social contracts. The concept of traveling great distances to aid strangers without expectation of reciprocal benefit was unusual. "Is this common among humans?" she asked. "Universal," Novak replied, "though it takes different forms. Some cultures emphasize community responsibility, others individual heroism. But the underlying principle, that we help those in need simply because they need help, that's something you'll find everywhere on Earth." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Washington, who entered with a datapad. "Captain Ellerin, good news. The last of your critically injured crew members has stabilized. We're ready to begin reviving those in cryostasis." "Thank you, Doctor. Your medical techniques have been illuminating." Ellerin had been particularly impressed by the human medical team, who combined sophisticated technology with what they called intuitive diagnosis, a process that seemed to rely partly on technological readings and partly on subtle observational cues that even Nebulon physicians with their compound eyes sometimes missed. Dr. Washington nodded. "We've learned from your medical staff as well. Your regenerative compounds could revolutionize trauma treatment on Earth." This casual mention of technological exchange sent a tremor of concern through Ellerin's antenna. The Confederation Council had strict protocols regarding technological sharing with non-member species. Yet here they were, repairs nearly complete, having already exchanged more knowledge than decades of formal diplomatic relations might have permitted. "Dr. Washington, Commander Novak, I find myself in an unusual diplomatic position," Ellerin said carefully. "Your assistance has saved my ship and crew. Yet I have no authority to negotiate formal relations or technology exchange." The two humans exchanged glances. Dr. Washington spoke first. "Captain, we didn't help you to get your technology." "Then why?" The question had been burning in Ellerin's mind since the first human ship had appeared. Novak's answer was simple, because it was the right thing to do. Later that day, Ellerin received a communication request from Earth itself. On the view screen appeared an elderly human with dark skin and piercing eyes, wearing what Ellerin recognized as formal diplomatic attire. "Captain Ellerin, I am Director General Imani Okafor of the United Earth Emergency Response Directorate. I trust our teams have been of assistance." Ellerin bowed in the Nebulon manner. "Director General, your people have saved my ship and crew. The Nebulon Confederation owes Earth a debt we cannot easily repay." The human waved this away. "No debt is necessary, Captain. However, this situation presents an opportunity. The Confederation has maintained minimal contact with Earth since the misunderstanding at Proxima Centauri. Perhaps this unplanned encounter might serve as a foundation for renewed diplomatic engagement." Ellerin felt a tension in her thorax. "I am not authorized to conduct diplomacy, Director General." "Nor am I," Okafor replied with a smile. "But I am authorized to extend an invitation. Once repairs are complete, we would be honored if you would remain in Earth orbit for a brief period as our guest. Our diplomatic corps would welcome the opportunity to establish direct communication with your government." The offer was unprecedented. Nebulon protocol demanded that any such invitation be processed through multiple diplomatic channels, risk assessments performed, cultural compatibility evaluated. Yet Ellerin found herself considering it seriously. "I will communicate your invitation to my superiors," she said finally. The response from Nebulon High Command came swiftly and was surprisingly positive. The rescue of the Celestial Vanguard had created a diplomatic opening that couldn't be ignored. Ellerin was instructed to accept the invitation, while a formal diplomatic delegation was assembled. As repairs neared completion, Ellerin was given a tour of the lead human vessel, the Mercy. What struck her most was how the ship balanced functionality with crew comfort. Where Nebulon vessels were designed with mathematical precision for maximum efficiency, human ships incorporated what they called human factors, design elements that acknowledged and accommodated the psychological and emotional needs of their crews. "Your people value intuition alongside logic," Ellerin observed to Lieutenant Chen as they toured the engineering section. Chen nodded. "We've learned that the most efficient machine isn't worth much if the biological components, us, can't operate it effectively when we're stressed, tired, or afraid." "You designed for failure," Ellerin realized, recalling their earlier conversation. "Not just mechanical failure, but human limitations." "Exactly." Chen's face lit up. "Perfect systems are brittle systems. They work flawlessly until they don't, and then they fail catastrophically. We prefer systems that bend rather than break, that degrade gracefully rather than collapse." This philosophy extended beyond engineering. In the Mercy's medical bay, Dr. Washington showed Ellerin how their treatment protocols incorporated not just physical healing but psychological support. "The mind and body are interconnected," he explained. "Addressing physical trauma while ignoring psychological impact leads to incomplete healing." "Is this why your medics speak to unconscious patients?" Ellerin had observed this behavior and found it puzzling. "Partly," Washington nodded. "There's evidence that unconscious patients can still process auditory information, but it's also for the medical staff. Verbalizing the treatment process helps us organize our thoughts and maintains our emotional connection to the patient as a person, not just a collection of symptoms." These insights into human psychology fascinated Ellerin. Nebulon society valued order, precision, and logical consistency. Emotions were acknowledged, but generally considered secondary to rational analysis. Humans, by contrast, seemed to integrate emotional and rational processing in ways that sometimes defied logic yet produced remarkable results. On their final evening before the Celestial Vanguard would be ready to travel, the humans organized what they called a cultural exchange dinner. Despite the challenges of incompatible biologies, humans couldn't survive in methane atmospheres, and nebulons couldn't digest Earth proteins. They created a shared space with separate environmental controls, where both species could remove protective gear and share their respective cuisines through viewing ports. Commander Novak introduced human music, art, and historical narratives via visual displays, while Elloren's cultural officer reciprocated with Nebulon harmonics and philosophical constructs. The differences were profound. Yet Elloren noted how quickly humans identified patterns and connections between their cultures. "You seem to actively seek commonality," she observed to Novak. "Pattern recognition is a human strength," Novak replied. "We evolved as social creatures who needed to understand others quickly, both potential allies and threats. Finding common ground is instinctive for us." "Yet your species has a violent history," Elloren noted, referencing the historical information the humans had shared. "Precisely because we're so social," Novak said. "We form intense group bonds that historically led to conflicts between different groups. But the same capacity that drove us to war also enabled us to build peace. Our empathy, our ability to understand others' perspectives and feelings, eventually extended beyond our immediate groups to encompass wider humanity, and now, other species." Elloren considered this. "You're suggesting that your emotional nature, which the Confederation has viewed as unpredictable and potentially dangerous, is actually the source of your cooperative capabilities." "Exactly," Novak smiled. "Our emotions aren't separate from our reason. They're integral to it. They drive our curiosity, our desire to connect, our need to help others. Without emotion, we'd have little motivation to explore the stars, let alone stop to help a damaged alien vessel." The conversation gave Elloren much to consider as she prepared her final report for Nebulon High Command. The humans had not only saved her ship but had fundamentally challenged Nebulon preconceptions about their species. On the day of departure, a formal ceremony was held in Earth orbit. The Celestial Vanguard, now fully repaired with several systems, actually improved beyond their original specifications, prepared to return to Confederation space. But there was one surprise Elloren hadn't anticipated. "Captain," Commander Novak announced during the ceremony, "with your permission, Earth would like to assign a small engineering and scientific liaison team to accompany you back to Nebulon space. They would serve as both technical support for the repairs we've implemented and as initial diplomatic contacts until formal relations can be established." The request was unexpected but not unwelcome. Elloren had already decided that the Confederation needed to reevaluate its understanding of humanity. Having human representatives aboard would accelerate that process. "We would be honored," she replied formally. As Lieutenant Chen and 5 other volunteers transferred their equipment to the Celestial Vanguard, Director General Okafor delivered a final address via communication link. "This unexpected encounter has reminded us that the vastness of space makes neighbors of us all," she said. "The challenges of surviving in this infinite void are too great for any species to face alone. Today marks not just the successful repair of a ship, but the repair of relations between our peoples." As the Celestial Vanguard prepared to depart, Elloren found herself on the observation deck with Commander Novak, watching Earth recede in the viewport. "Your world is beautiful," Elloren said. "I believe my government severely misjudged your species." Novak smiled. "First impressions are rarely accurate. It takes time to truly understand others. The Proxima incident was a misunderstanding by both sides," Novak finished. "We interpreted a quarantine as aggression. You interpreted our response as irrational emotionalism. Neither of us took the time to understand the other's perspective." Elloren's antenna dipped in acknowledgement. "And now? Now we have this moment," Novak gestured to the ship around them. "A crisis that brought us together instead of driving us apart. An opportunity to begin again." As the Celestial Vanguard engaged its repaired engines and accelerated toward Nebulon space, Elloren reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. They had approached Earth expecting, at best, basic repairs that would allow them to limp home. Instead, they had received not only technical assistance beyond their expectations, but a profound lesson in interspecies understanding. The humans had a saying that Lieutenant Chen had shared: A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. This crisis, this near disaster, had opened a door that decades of formal diplomacy had failed to unlock. As Captain Ellerin prepared to introduce Lieutenant Chen and her team to the Nebulon High Command, she knew that the galaxy had changed. Not through war or treaty or grand diplomatic gesture, but through a simple act of compassion when one species reached out a hand to another in need. The humans had come to make repairs. What they offered instead was something far more valuable: a new beginning.